Hey guys, really quick, I just want to say we're still trying to get to 1,000 subscribers by May of next year, and if we do, we will be releasing a new series. We also have free content on our Patreon, so go check us out there. And as always, like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps the channel. With all that said, let's get straight into the gameplay. This week, Jordan will be piloting Liesa, Forgotten Archangel, a Orzhov Aristocrats deck. He opened with a Caves of Koilos, Swamp, Plains, Meathook Massacre, Swords to Plowshare, Ranger Captain of Eos, and a Esper Sentinel. Ryan is piloting Daryl, Hunter of Walkers, a Pyroclasm control deck. He opened with a Collector Oof, Aether Flash, a Forest, Verdant Catacombs, Scalding Tarn, and Spire Garden. Nash is piloting Vile Smasher Kydele, and he opened with a Nature's Claim, Nature's Lore, Rejuvenating Springs, Blood Crypt, Villainous Wealth, Demonic Tutor, and Exsanguinate. And Ron is piloting Xenagos. He opened with a Shanra's Ignition, Balefire Dragon, Eternal Witness, Finhorn Elves, Forest, a Rockfall Valley, and Spire Garden. Jordan wins the dice roll and starts off by playing a Plains and then casting Esper Sentinel. Ryan plays and cracks a Scalding Tarn, getting a Stomping Grounds into play tapped. Nash starts things off by playing a Blood Crypt tapped and passing. Ron plays a Spire Garden and then casts Finhorn Elves. On Jordan's turn, he plays a Cave of Koilos as his land for turn, and then declares attacks at Ryan with the Esper Sentinel for 1 damage. Ryan plays Verdant Catacombs as his land for turn, and then he cracks it, getting a Taiga into play. He then taps out to play Collector Oof and passes the turn. On Nash's turn, he plays a Rejuvenating Spring, followed by a Nature's Lore, getting a Zagoth Triome into play. Ron starts his turn off by playing a Mountain, and then tapping out in order to cast Rhythm of the Wild. Jordan starts his turn off by playing a Shattered Sanctum, and then tapping out to cast his Ranger Captain of Eos, getting Viscera Seer off the ETB trigger. He then attacks Nash with his Esper Sentinel. Ryan plays a Forest as his land for turn, and then passes. Nash plays a Forest as land for turn, and then casts Kydele. Ron plays a Rockfall Valley as his land for turn, and then passes the turn. Jordan starts his turn off by playing a Swamp, and then follows this up with Viscera Seer. He then moves to combat and declares attacks with Ranger Captain of Eos at Ryan. Ryan starts his turn off by playing his own Spire Garden. He then taps out in order to play Aether Flash. Nash starts his turn off by casting 3 Visits, getting a tapped Ketria Triome into play. Ron starts his turn off with a Mountain and taps out in order to cast Xenagos. Jordan plays a Swamp as his land for turn and then taps out in order to cast his commander, Liesa. He then moves to combat and attacks Ryan with Ranger Captain of Eos. Ryan plays a Forest for land for turn and then casts Daryl, Hunter of Walkers. Nash plays Verdant Catacombs as his land for turn, and then cracks it, getting a Watery Grave into play, untapped. He then casts Demonic Tutor. He then passes. Ron untaps and passes the turn. On Jordan's turn, he moves to combat and declares attacks with Ranger Captain of Eos at Ron and his commander at Ryan. On Ryan's upkeep, he targets Jordan with Daryl's trigger and holds priority, using Daryl's activated ability to kill Viscera Seer. Jordan responds by first sacrificing Ranger Captain of Eos in order to scry a card. He then flashes out Dictate of Erebos. Off the Viscera Seer's death, Dictate of Erebos triggers, and Ryan sacrifices Collector Oof, Nash sacrifices Kydele, and Ron sacrifices Finhorn Elves. Then, the 3 zombies ETB from Daryl's triggered ability, and there are 3 triggers on Aether Flash. The first trigger of Aether Flash resolves, killing one of the zombies, causing Ryan to sacrifice Daryl after a draw trigger. Then the other 2 triggers resolve, killing the other 2 walkers. Then, on Ryan's main phase, he plays Yavi Maya, Cradle of Growth, as his land for turn. He follows this up with a Perforce, God of the Forge. Nash starts his turn off by casting Dockside Extortionist, netting 6 treasures off the ETB. Then it dies to the Aether Flash ETB trigger. He then taps out, using 3 of his 6 treasures in order to cast Emergent Ultimatum. He lets Ryan choose, and he selects the 3 cards Consecrated Sphinx, Magic Mirror, and Corrosive Grip. Ryan picks to let him have Magic Mirror and Corrosive Grip. He then free casts Corrosive Grip, destroying the Dictate of Erebos, and then follows this up with Magic Mirror. On Ron's turn, he plays a Weaver of Harmony, giving it a +1/1 from the Riot trigger. He then moves to combat and uses his commander's triggered ability to give it plus 3/3 in haste. He then attacks Jordan for 6. On Jordan's turn, he plays a swamp and then casts Liliana Dreadhorde General. He then +1s Liliana, creating a zombie, causing an Aether Flash trigger, giving him a draw. He then moves to combat, attacking with both his commander and Esper Sentinel at Nash, dealing 5 damage. On Ryan's turn, he plays a forest, then casts Allosaurus Shepherd. In response to the Aether Flash trigger, he activates Allosaurus Shepherd's activated ability to make all elves into 5/5 dinos. Allosaurus Shepherd then takes 2 damage, and then Ryan passes the turn. Nash starts his turn off by playing a swamp. He then taps out to cast Nicol Bolas, God Pharaoh, and activates his down tick to destroy Liliana Dreadhorde General. On Ron's turn, he plays a Stomping Ground, and then moves to combat, targeting his Weaver of Harmony with Xenagos' triggered ability. He then attacks Jordan for 6 damage. On Jordan's turn, he moves to combat and attacks with both Esper Sentinel and his commander at Nicol Bolas, killing it. On Ryan's turn, he plays a Mana Crypt, followed by an Imperial Recruiter, getting Goblin Recruiter to hand. He then casts the Goblin Recruiter, stacking to top, Conspicuous Snoop, Kiki Jiki, then Dockside Extortionist. On Nash's turn, he casts his commander Vile Smasher and then passes the turn. On Ron's turn, he casts Worldly Tutor, putting Toski, Bearer of Secrets, to the top. Jordan starts his turn off by playing a Pathway as land for turn, and then moves to combat, attacking Ryan with his commander. On second main phase, he casts Ranger Captain of Eos, getting a Kami of False Hope off the ETB trigger. On Ryan's turn, Jordan responds to the Crypt trigger, sacrificing Ranger Captain of Eos to prevent Ryan from casting non-creature spells. Ryan then casts Conspicuous Snoop on his main phase, and responds to the Aether Flash trigger by attempting to clone Conspicuous Snoop. Jordan responds by Swords to Plowsharing the Conspicuous Snoop. Ryan then recasts his commander and passes. On Nash's turn, he casts Sunbird's Invocation, causing a trigger on Vile Smasher, dealing 6 to Jordan. On Ron's turn, he casts Toski, Bearer of Secrets, and chooses to give it a +1/1 off the raid trigger. He then moves to combat and uses Xenagos' ability to give it +2/2 in haste. He then declares attacks with both his creatures at Ryan and Jordan, getting him 2 draws. Ron then casts Nature's Claim on the Aether Flash, destroying it. On Jordan's turn, he cast Meathook Massacre X4 to wipe the board. He then follows this up by playing Kami of False Hope. On Ryan's turn, he recasts Daryl and then passes. On EOT, Nash plays a Brainstorm. On Nash's turn, he plays a Journey to the Oracle, getting 4 lands into play. Nash hits a Regrowth off the Sunbird's Invocation, using it to recur his Demonic Tutor. He then casts Demonic Tutor and follows this up with an Ugin. Off the Sunbird's Invocation, he hits a Valakut Awakening. He then activates Ugin's second ability X5 in order to clear all colored permanents CMC 5 or less from the board. He then plays an Underground Stadium, followed by a Soul Ring. He then follows this up with a Felwar Stone. Ron starts his turn off by playing Llanowar Elf, and then follows this up with a Sylvan Library. On Jordan's turn, he recasts his commander, followed by Viscera Seer. Ryan starts his turn off by playing a Dockside Extortionist, getting 5 treasures. He then taps out and sacrifices some of his treasures in order to cast Daryl. Nash starts his turn off with a Mana Confluence as land, and then proceeds to cast an Omniscience, hitting a Nyx Bloom Ancient off the Sunbird's Invocation. He then proceeds to cast Exsanguinate X22, hitting a Fury Storm off the Sunbird's Invocation, copying Exsanguinate 4 times.